'Tis the season of hope and holly. 'Tis the season of birth and rebirth. 'Tis the season of cookies and caroling. Yule logs, Santa Claus. Fig trees that get the 3 jewels of Buddha hang on them. You knew that, right? You do that in your house? We do that in our house. 'Tis the season that we have a glut of midwinter holidays, and yet each time I find there's something missing. Something obvious, hiding in plain sight. I'm going to give you the list again, or a new list. Jesus, Santa Claus, the Maccabees, Frosty the Snowman, the Festival of Ganesha, Buddha, fig trees. Am I missing anybody? Rudolph. Right. And all of the other reindeer. And I'm missing the female. I am missing the women. Even in the pagan holiday of the Oak King and the Holly King. Just saying. See, sometimes the patriarchy is so ubiquitous, it goes everywhere, that we're actually unaware of the absence of the sacred feminine. We don't even know it's not there, because it's so everywhere. Well, you know, there's this one woman. She's usually quiet, played in pageants all over this Sunday, and others, by a little white girl, or the lightest skinned girl, dressed in blue and silent. The shepherds, often girls dressed as boys playing shepherds because the boys didn't want to turn up for rehearsal. They have lines. The kings, often one of those is also a girl played by a boy because he didn't, he had basketball practice. I'm sorry, that was highly sexist. Oops. It's true. It's true. And yet Mary, does she get lines in the Christmas pageant? No, none. No lines for her. Yeah. So, I mean, even my favorite TV special, which is the Charlie Brown Christmas, we know that, we love that. Linus delivers the story. What would it be like if Lucy did it? Think about it. Yeah. So, and we get these beautiful songs, like Mary, Did You Know? Of course she did. Read the book. So she might not have known the specifics, but she certainly knew she was kissing the face of God. I mean, she's a leading character in this story, full of grace. Changed in the Protestant Reformation to much favored or highly favored. So, whereas some may ask, what would Jesus do? This season, I want you to start asking, what would Mary do? I mean, I think I had the grace of being invited to teach in Switzerland. It's one of the joys of my life. And I think the first time I went over there was 99. And there's a church there. A giant old stone cathedral that is where Calvin first preached his institutes, which were his treatises, much the same as the ones that were nailed to the door in Wittenberg, much the same as Luther. And it changed the world. It changed Christianity. It changed the modern world. So on my first day off, I went there because I'm a little bit of a religious geek. So I went there so excited because this is one of the places it happened. It's right by the Museum of the Reformation. It has all the original documents. So on my first day off, I'm down there to this beautiful, giant stone pillars. I mean, truly simple, gorgeous. You walk in there. Well, one of the things that also happens is that in 65, was it? No, 76. They had heating issues. And it's Switzerland, so it's really cold. So they go under the building to discover how can we fix the heating situation. And they discover the foundation is not as stable, even though the whole thing is made out of giant pieces of granite and stone. And they have to start fixing it. So they start digging. And one of the things that they discovered was this vast archaeological site. And you can go there. Now it's beautiful. I mean, it's all state of the art. It was first opened back then, and it was these wooden paths you could walk down. And you could walk down and down and down and down. And they have found that on that site, there have been sacred ritual fires dating back to 1150 BC. It's a very, very cool place. But the first time I went, and I'm walking down these wooden rails, there's all of these bits of curlicues and stone whatnots kind of on the side. And there's a little tiny tag that says, these were removed by Calvin, in the austerity message of the church. And I sort of look, and I'm seeing, amidst the curlicues and amidst that, what look like bits and pieces of women. I mean, I don't know if they were angels, I don't know if they were saints, but they're bits and edges of stone pieces. And of course, they weren't the interesting part because they're only 400 to 500 years old, right? And we're going deeper. So, German scholar Remigius Baumer tells us that the destruction of Marian paintings was not ordered by Calvin alone, but virtually all Mary's pictures, all of her statues, were destroyed as the result of his 1535 order. John Calvin considered veneration of religious pictures, especially those of Mary, as heresy. It is arguable that the Calvinist Protestant Reformation had expanded the depth of the internalized patriarchy by removing Mary from all the sanctuaries and closing all the convents. All convents on territories that were not owned by the Vatican or under Vatican control. As Calvin put it so succinctly, quote, "A woman's place is in the home." You have heard that phrase. It belongs to him, and it's meant literally. Ironically, he was a big proponent of women's literacy. He took that from the convents and took it away from the sisters that were teaching it and placed it into the home so that the women could read the Bible, but they could not preach it and they could not teach it. They could not even study it deeply. They could not act as teachers, nor were they to be in positions of power because it was against their constitution. So women in that time, in the 1500s, who needed refuge of any kind, holy dedication, maybe they were simply called to deeper study, or maybe they were simply called to the company of women, had no legal place to go. There was no legitimate place for there to be other than their father's house, their brother's house, or their husband's. It is worth noting, in the years before, several women in sacred communities have produced not one, not two, but many books, because the intelligentsia was becoming literate. They were reading, and they became bestsellers for both men and women, for those who could read. They had Mathilde of Magdeburg wrote The Flowing Light of the Godhead. Just sitting there, right? Marguerite Porret, and I'm probably messing up her name, wrote The Mirror of Simple Souls. They were two powerful Begun mystics, and they also were bestsellers of their day. And then came this woman here, Christine de Pizan. She wrote The Book of the City of Ladies, first in 1405. Because travel is slow, it took about 100 years for it to start getting really, really popular. Considered by many to be the first feminist treatise, it explores the suffering and oppression of women. Scholars tell us, quote, in order to affirm that women as well as men could be representatives of the divine, Christine emphasized both her female authorship and female representation of the divine. Next slide. Better close the convents. This is a picture of her creating her images of creating the city of women. Yeah. But we still have Mary. Even if all we have is her name, starting with her name, because this is a sacred story and all elements are important. We forget that. Mary, from the Greek Marie, Miriam, Marim. It also comes to us from the Hebrew Mara, which means bitter. And they make a big deal. Some of you may have heard that the word Mary means bitter. Well, in catechism they teach you that. It has its roots in, I love it. It also has its roots, it's the same root word for rebellion and rebellious. And from the Egyptian Mri, M-R-Y, meaning beloved and love. She may or may not have been a flesh and blood person. She may be a composite person. Her story is mixed with stories of other people. But we all have stories like that in our lives that continue on and on and on. Her story is found in ancient Egypt. Her story is found in Persia. It is a retelling of the Miriam and Moses story. She is lauded in Islam. And here we know her as the mother of Jesus. But what is her name? What does her name mean? Well, I'm going to start with bitter. I'm going to start with bitter because bitter in ancient Hebrew doesn't mean what it means now. Where we go? Bitter doesn't mean cynical, it doesn't mean resentful, it doesn't mean rancorous, it doesn't mean aggrieved, it doesn't translate into sour or unsweetened. It means strong. It means powerful. A bitter taste is a strong taste. It's a powerful taste. It slams your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. Just for a second, go. Slams your tongue up to the throat. Right. Your cheeks pull in, your nostrils flare out. Anybody here do yoga? Couple? Anybody do Tai Chi? Okay. Have you been told to put your tongue to the roof of your mouth because it closes off the circuit of energy and you are your own? She was bitter. She was strong. She was herself. The next comes to rebellion and rebelliousness. This is not some common plain milk toast, not some sweet and demure child, but she was rebellious. She went on her own to see Elizabeth. On her own she went to see Elizabeth. She was brave. She was a speaker of truth to power. And Mary means beloved. Beloved. I love that word. You can sit in that word. What does it mean to look in the mirror and your name is beloved? Just take that with you. Everybody, your middle name is now Mary. You're going to go and you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to say, my name is beloved and I'm strong. And lastly, and most anciently, it comes from mer, meaning water. We come from them, water. We gestate in water. Evolutionarily, practically, we're part of the divine flow. And she represents our mother. And the story in Luke, specifically like Luke 26, 28, which before the Reformation, and still in some Catholic catechisms, Hail Mary, full of grace. When that became Hail Mary, highly favored, it's only full of grace now in the Aramaic translations. Those are the ones that Jesus, natural language. It means something slightly different when you're walking around full of grace. So, if one allows her to be demoted, if her obedience is read as subservience, it's a big difference to be obedient to your heart and obedient to God, that which is higher than you and holy, and subservient. They're not the same thing. Her trust in the divine growing within her is brave, and it's been turned into duty and obligation. Think about Miriam. Think about Elizabeth is identified as a prophetess. Mary, did you know? Of course she did. If we're going to use the current Christian Bible throughout the entire song of Mary Did You Know, with all of Jesus' miracles, why leave off the big dude angels coming to her? Really? What about her cousin Elizabeth's greeting? Baby leapt in her womb. This is big stuff. So the patriarchy may have tried to dismiss her, but her name remains. Her name is strength, rebellion, beloved. The divine feminine is beloved strength, not separate, integral, part of, too long absent, too long buried underneath, but as most of the most precious things, they hide sitting there, right there in plain sight. So what does this teach us? What does this teach us in this holiday? It teaches us that we have to be strong. No matter what the odds. When there's no room for us anywhere and we feel all alone and we are giving birth in a stable. Anybody been in a stable? It teaches us to trust our deepest hearts. What did they tell you is right and wrong? What did they tell you is truth? What is there? It teaches us to raise up all of those around you. She raised this child. We raise up the world. It tells us that us as individuals is not as important as us as families, as us as communities is not as important as the world. It tells us it's okay to be a badass, unique individual. It tells us that we are chosen and can carry the most important kinds of salvations. So this season, when you're confronted with, let's put Christ back in Christmas, you might consider saying yes, absolutely, by loving our neighbors as ourselves, by feeding the hungry, by clothing the poor, by helping to heal the sick, and you know, while we're at it, let's put Mary back there too. Put her back in your powers of creation. You're carrying an idea to term, nurturing it until it grows to provide sustenance and salvation for the future. Beverly Lanzetta writes, quote, expressing a divine concern for the suffering of women, the human family, and all creation, contemplative feminism uses the resource of the wisdom traditions to improve the conditions that breed violence, subjugation, and hatred. Every effort made toward raising women's inherent dignity and worth is a self-loving that mirrors the divine loving in our souls. Every effort made toward raising women's inherent dignity and worth is a self-loving that mirrors the divine loving in our souls. In the contemplative traditions of deep inquiry, there is a meeting of the spiritual, the emotional, and the practical. I invite you into this space of asking, how has Mary, called Theotokos in the Greek, Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, full of grace, Redeemer of Eve, Restorer of original blessing, been turned into a subservient milquetoast, desexed virgin of unattainable virtue instead of a warrior princess who became the queen for the holy. What is virginity? I'm going to give you some questions. I'm not going to give you any answers. What is virginity? There's so many variations. Psychological, physiological, religious. Ask yourself this question. Ask yourself, who gave you the definition of what virginity is? With your tongue on the roof of your mouth, contemplate. What is the definition of virgin? What is power? What is strength? Where does it come from? What does it mean to be power-filled? What is obedience? Who do you find yourself blindly obeying? Whom and what are you called to obey? Ask yourself, what would Mary do? This holiday season, when confronted with all that commercialism, the fights over Santas, oh, please. Really? Multitude of shoppers who can't find parking spaces. When confronted with putting Christ back in Christmas and all of its snarky little comments that go back there. No, I'm going to put, the Yule tree back in. I'm going to put the log back in. Really? Answer. Yes, of course. I'm doing my best to clothe the naked. I am doing my best to feed the hungry. I'm going to help heal the sick. This may look like a lot of different social actions, and that's exactly what it is. It's being out there in the world, doing as much good as you can, whenever you can. We're going to say, yeah, and while we're doing that, we're going to put Mary back too. I wish to close with some words from Rilke in Letters to a Young Poet. Perhaps all over there is great motherhood, a common longing, and the mother's beauty in ministering motherhood. And even in the man, there is a motherhood. It seems to me physically and spiritually, perhaps both sexes are more related than we think. And the great renewal of the world will consist of this. Freed of all false feelings and reluctances, we will seek each other not as opposites, but as brothers and sisters, and we will come together as human beings. This season, may we come together knowing we are strong, knowing that we are loved and we are beloved. We are people of deep love with roots that go down into the earth and up to heaven. A love that can move mountains, gestate salvations, and feed all that we are so hungry to receive. And so it is. Amen.